What's up, you guys? Welcome to episode 2 of the Greens podcast. I'm so excited for this episode. We're about to do a deep dive we're going to be unpacking the dirty secret of California's legal weed, an LA Times and WeedWeek investigation. I'm so excited to welcome Alex Halperin.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Yes, of course. I'm really excited to have you on because this is a big story. It's a story that really shook up the industry because all of us shop at dispensaries, and the biggest thing that they tell us is shop here, it's clean. Don't shop at the trap shops. Don't shop at the guy down the street. Go to the shops. So this article really begins with calling out the Real California campaign, which was a $5 million we funded it, taxpayer-funded campaign to promote California cannabis as safe. I'm a consumer. I can tell you that I went to dispensaries specifically for that purpose. I like COAs. I like looking at the data and being able to track where my weed comes from. So when I heard that, it was a big disappointment. So I think before we get into it, let's start off with thanking our sponsors. So our sponsors for today's show, Cornerstone Wellness, shout out to them. It's a really great sponsorship considering the topic because they're actually a location that specializes in ecological and regenerative clean green cannabis. So they actually gave us some goodies today, a lot of the cleanest brands out there. They brought us to enjoy. So this one's for you. Enjoy. Yeah, go ahead and share the people what's inside. Mine is here. We have a Space Gem, which is solventless vegan, which I love these and I've heard a lot of great things. Also, vapes were a big aspect of it, and we have OCal certified Jetty vapes here. And so I'm really excited that they gave us a good mix of different stuff. All certified clean green. Thank you, Cornerstone Wellness. If you guys are interested in looking for clean weed, be sure to go there. Really good location. So today I packed us a bowl with Sunbright Gardens Cherry Berry Sour Funk. This is Latina owned and grown. So I'm really excited to support them. I broke it up earlier and you can smell the terps. Wow. Delicious. Really just soft as well. So I'm excited to taste this. So Alex, you now have a Mota Glass bong.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
American made, clean green on American made glass right there. That's a beautiful combination right here. If you want to be a conscious consumer smoking the best out of the best, it doesn't get better than this. Ecologically grown on locally blown. Let's take a bong rip. Cheers. So I wanted to kick off with learning more about you. Can you please share with us, how you got your start in journalism and then eventually made it to cannabis journalism?
Sure. So I'm from New York, and really always wanted to be a journalist. As a kid, I would read Rolling Stone and stuff like that, and I was into Hunter Thompson and PJ O'Rourke and some of their some of these old school guys. And as I was growing up, I got more interested in digital journalism became sort of the thing. And I became interested in business journalism, which we'd always thought about it. I'd always thought of journalism more as about politics, but business sort of captured my interest a little more. And so I worked for a while for Dow Jones for Business Week. I had a grant to travel in Africa for a while, writing on economic development. And then I was news editor at Salon for a while, which was more politics. And about 10 years ago now, I was in New York, and Fast Company sent me to MJ BizCon, it was probably like the second or third MJ BizCon. It was in 2014. And I got there, and sort of the idea, weed wasn't a part of my life. But I had sort of caught wind a little bit of legalization beginning to emerge a little bit, and people were starting to talk about it, and I was really interested in it, in that it was just like, how is this going to happen? This is this is illegal. um, and are they going to let it happen? How would that work? The issues, some of the issues of social justice sort of came to mind as well. And so I went to MJ BizCon in 2014, which was about 3,500 people, and it was at the Rio, which
Wow.
which wasn't seen as sort of the crown jewel of the strip at the time. And you know, it was pretty low rent, pretty small, pretty intimate, but also a lot of interesting people. And I learned a huge amount, and I sort of very quickly realized that like this was an amazing story, and that I figured it probably would be an undercovered story because the news industry, it wasn't necessarily a priority, and it wasn't in New York or Washington. And to the extent it was in California, it wasn't necessarily the main story in California. Right. And so I, not too long after that, sort of one of the companies that interested me the most invited me to embed with them in Denver. And so I moved to Denver, and I was there for about a year and a half. And then that's when I started WeedWeek. And sort of the plan was, I thought when California legalizes, I'll move to California. And that's what I did. And I've been building WeedWeek into a media company itself, which is its own adventure.
Yeah. Well, you are an entrepreneur in your own right as well. And that's something that I think people forget, is that sometimes people want to put you in a bucket. Oh, you're this, you're a journalist, but actually you're a journalist, you're a business owner, you're an entrepreneur in cannabis.
WeedWeek is an ancillary company, I guess.
I'm interested, the players that you met in 2014, are they still around, or are there some familiar faces that were there maybe at that conference that you still see today?
Some of them are, I can't believe I'm still around. But I am. And, you know, a good number of them are actually, not all of them, certainly, but a lot of them are. I think it's been hard for just about everybody at one time or another. But you know, for some people, something keeps everyone going. So for some people, it's the plant, the story of legalization, the opportunity, and it's really been sort of a boom town, and it's still around, and it's been through a lot of changes, hard, and obviously a lot of growth, but a lot of struggle. And I was certainly right that it's just been a great story. And it's a story that's gone on for a decade now, and is now, I guess, at the threshold of federal legalization or some version of that, which it took a lot longer than a lot of people thought it would, but a huge amount has happened. I say that, you know, in 2014, people were saying, you know, California will legalize, and then sort of federal legalization will be inevitable. And that hasn't quite happened yet, but not too many predictions from 2014 have held up that well.
Yeah. So in 2014, you know, people throw out years all the time. Oh, 3 years it's going to legalize. In 5 years, it's going to be legalized. In 2014, what were they saying back then?
Yeah. Like
by 2020, it's going to be.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, 2020 seemed like a long way away. And yeah, now it seems like a long time ago.
So funny. I could see like in 2014 being like, yeah, guys, we're going to be on another side of this in 2020. Just see. And then we're here in 2024 and not so much. So jumping into the story a little bit. So how did the topic of the story just first come across your desk? Would love to know how this all began.
Sure. So a couple of years ago in 2022, sort of the big the big lab story was potency inflation.
Right,
And
Jeter's was had a lawsuit for that, right?
well, yes, actually, that was based on my reporting. So, and some of the labs, some of the lab executives published a story in a cannabis industry journal, which is a sort of an industry publication, and they said, "Hey, we're trying to be honest and get potency right, and as a result, we can't get any business. We're losing all our business to companies to labs that are offering folks better or higher THC numbers, because while connoisseurs don't say this, or connoisseurs like to downplay THC, clearly it's pretty popular with customers, and stores know that price and potency is what moves product. So there's a real business incentive for companies to be selling higher potency product. And these lab execs were complaining that they couldn't give honest results and stay in business. And they also said that they had been annoyed, and they found out, they bought some product off shelves and found a lot of potency inflation, and then they tested some more and found some pesticides as well, including some pesticides that weren't allowed in California products. And so I wrote a story where for WeedWeek, where I bought a couple pre-rolls and got them tested at 2 labs, and in fact found quite a bit of potency inflation. Of the 7 brands I bought, all 7 had significant potency inflation. The most significant was one where the actual content was about 8 or 9%, but it was marked about 55%.
Wait, 8 or 9?
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna say like 20 or 30. That's 8 or 9. I mean, that's like just above CBD at this point.
Yeah.
And
No.
that's shocking.
I mean, it was kind of amazing in that it was, so that was like 500% or more than 500%
the
inflation.
audacity, the fact that they think that little of us, that we're going to purchase, they're not going to know. The audacity sometimes.
But other brands, it was more normal, 20 to 30%.
I was going to say, what is the threshold of normal?
Well, so in California basically allows 10%.
I would give and take 10%. I'd be okay with it. I think over 20 is where, as a consumer, I'd feel like a little duped. Not what I paid for, especially when, and this has been, a topic in general about dispensaries, that sometimes bud tenders aren't qualified to sell the way they should be. They're not being trained properly. And a lot of bud tenders really are just on it, but some of them aren't given the proper training to actually be able to sell better. So what they end up doing is they sell the percentage of THC.
Sure.
And so, that's what I love actually about Cornerstone Wellness, because their wellness consultants can break down a piece of flower from the terpenes to the feelings to characteristics that the average person may not know, but it's their job to know. Where and then you go into some shops and all they know is the brand name and the THC percentage. So I can see that it's a bigger problem that I think affects different areas of the business.
As was in sort of our sidebar explaining how we did the pesticide story, some bud tenders don't even know what a COA is. So I did the potency inflation story, and there were some lawsuits that stemmed from it. And I was interested in the pesticide story as well, but sort of buying all the product. It was more money than I had to spend, and because it was a public health issue, whereas potency inflation is not really a public health issue. It was something that should go to a larger audience, and it just made more sense. And I knew sort of the LA Times could could bring more resources to bear on a story like this, and they did, with so many informative charts and graphs and wonderful photography, and of course working with Paige St. John, who's just a phenomenal reporter. So I had been who co-wrote the story. So I had been talking to an editor at the LA Times about a story or two, and they had quite a few mainstream publications haven't taken weed seriously, but the LA Times has, and they had done a major series looking at a lot of conditions for workers on farms. Some of them were licensed. I think some of them were unlicensed. And in that, Paige had been one of the lead reporters on that, and she had learned. She's based in Northern California, and she had encountered on illegal grows and perhaps legal grows as well, quite a few pesticides as well. So whereas I had heard about the pesticides issues happening at the lab level, she had heard about pesticides that were being used on farms, some of which were licensed, some of which were unlicensed, but she was also able to track some of that product into the licensed supply chain. So that's sort of, and the editor at the time sort of introduced us, and we started talking, and the story came together, and as well as Paige did a separate story on some of the things she encountered in Northern California at the farms, where some of the most dangerous chemicals were encountered. These are chemicals that aren't allowed in the country, but were being used.
Wow.
So getting back to your question, so essentially we decided that the testing part of the story would involve buying product off shelves and getting them tested at labs. And we did it at two labs, at Anresco and SC Labs.
How are those labs chosen? Did they come to you guys, or?
We chose them. And Anresco was one of the labs that had written the initial letters about issues with potency inflation, and then SC Labs, I don't believe, had been involved in that article, but they had a strong reputation. And what we did was all the testing was blind. So they didn't know which products they were reviewing. So we wanted to do two labs to ensure that the results matched each other, to sort of give them credibility, because with just one, then it's possible to say, well, who's to say that one lab is right and one lab is wrong? These are complicated questions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think that, when the article first begins, like I mentioned before, it calls out the Real California campaign. And the investigation ultimately exposed that nearly half of the 42 products, came back as showing those high concentrations of pesticides. So what is the problem with pesticides in general? Why is this such an issue? It sounds like something obviously that we would be concerned about, but I think that one of the things that I liked about the reporting is that infographic, specifically contaminated weed in you. Can you share a little bit about the dangers behind pesticides and why we should care to begin with?
Sure. So pesticides is sort of an umbrella term covering chemicals that are used in agriculture to kill pests. Pest kills, and largely insects, but also various kinds of fungi, and some other things as well. And these are chemicals that are designed to kill living things, and as a result, many of them have toxic effects on human beings. But those toxic effects are largely unstudied. So, meaning that what we know about pesticides and the dangers associated with them is largely to do with agricultural workers and who are exposed to these chemicals all day, every day. And they can cause sort of headaches and migraines and fainting spells and nausea to some much more serious issues. But they're all different,
Right.
And none of them have really been tested for if you ignite them and inhale them. So if they are hitting your skin like they are with agricultural workers, or if they're on the rind of a fruit that you buy at the supermarket, that gets filtered through the liver or it gets blocked by the skin. Nobody really knows how these chemicals, what they do to you when you heat them and suck them into your lungs and into your bloodstream and through which go quickly to your brain and other vital organs.
And that's always been the issue with regarding vapes in general, right? That they go straight into the bloodstream, straight into the lung tissue. So I think that basically they're saying that because the pesticides do this to the skin, we can imagine what they would do to the lungs, right? But they haven't done the testing to actually prove that.
Right. So many of these, so the way California has decided to deal with this issue is that it created a list of 66 pesticides, and it said 20 of them are not allowed in cannabis at any detectable level, and then the other 40 can't be above a certain level, and that level is generally pegged to the amount which is allowed in cigarettes. And the amount allowed in cigarettes wasn't determined based on them being studied for what the dangers of them are, but rather just saying, okay, they're already smoking cigarettes. That's pretty bad for you. Let's just cap it at this level. And that's how much of it you're allowed to have. So California banned about 20 pesticides, and then there were 40 more where it said, okay, we're going to cap them at the level allowed in cigarettes, even though nobody really knows that level isn't sort of directly tied to experimentation on what they do.
Especially because of their ease of use and their accessibility, people are just taking them down, I think, one a week. And from my time going to dispensaries, I would see lines of people, and we'd ask them, what are you guys in line for? They're going for their stizzy. They're going for their vape pen because they're parents and they can't smell like weed.
Yeah, so that's one issue with. So I mean, one of the issues with vapes is that it's also, in addition to them being very popular, it's just very hard to know what's in them. Yeah. And in fact, they
don't have at-home tests, which that would be amazing.
Right, and our reporting showed that there's this sort of really unregulated sort of brokered market of jars of cheap vape oil, and it goes into competing vape products. So like, one factory takes the same batch of oil and puts it into competing brands of vape products, and there's just not much reason to be confident in the safety of those products. And so I should say that our research focused on vapes.
Yeah.
And that was sort of one of the reasons why.
Yeah, I could see that. So I think that this piece obviously exposes significant negligence by California regulators. So it's really no wonder that when I was reading the piece, the DCC, they weren't very cooperative. They weren't really trying to talk to you. Can you share a little bit about what it was like, your experience with just working with their people?
Sure. Well, so I've been working with the people at the DCC for a long time, and I have good relationships with plenty of them. But there is. So our reporting found several kinds of problems with the tests we did. First, we found pesticides that are banned. Then we found pesticides that are limited at levels above what they're limited as. And then we found additional pesticides that aren't on the list, but which are potentially dangerous, including some pesticides that aren't even allowed in the country. So why would California require that they be tested for?
No.
So trying to figure out the protocols for which pesticide should be tested for is a very challenging project, and in cannabis. This is a new crop. Nobody knows what happens when you inhale these chemicals. And it's made even harder because without the federal authorities, without the Environmental Protection Agency participating, essentially each state is figuring out what pesticides to allow or what other how much of various contaminants is safe.
Wow.
Questions like that for itself, which is sort of absurd. It's sort of like each state deciding for itself what medical benefits medical
strange.
cannabis has. It's absurd. So I want to say that the DCC has big challenges that it has to face. And this is just one of many, many complexities in the California cannabis market that they are dealing with. A deeply entrenched sort of legacy community, diversion to the illegal market, numerous cities that still don't allow cannabis, essentially turning the market over to the illegal market. So the DCC has a lot of hard things that it has to do. But its top priority, according to the law, is keeping people safe. And I believe they didn't issue any recalls for a pesticide until last fall. And that was for a chemical called chlorphenapyr, which is totally banned, but which is a chemical that has, I'm not sure if this is the right term, but a very long half-life. So, for example, a lot of growers on the illegal market used it. And then if those facilities get licensed, then it remains in the walls or in the drywall. So even if
it seeps in.
So even if growers aren't using it, you could still pop negative for this chemical. Similarly, in the Central Valley, when there are grows in major agricultural areas, you have pesticides being swept in by the wind in amounts that would pop on the test. So these are all major challenges for the DCC to deal with. But yeah, I mean, they didn't respond to our findings in a meaningful way. They haven't responded to the article.
They haven't really responded. I mean, you have their official response?
There hasn't been any official comment on the article. The only thing that's happened is that there have been several recalls also for chlorphenapyr. And what this may reflect in our reporting is that they still have very little capacity to test for various chemicals. So it would seem that they can test for chlorphenapyr, but maybe not all of the other dozens of chemicals that are limited. So, and they haven't really acknowledged this in a formal way.
Do you think they will?
I don't know.
I guess time will tell on that one. I think that, they've responded with action. I think that that's kind of what they're comfortable with at this time. I want to go back to June 14th when the story dropped. So the story drops. How was the story first received to the public? What was the mood that you saw when it first dropped?
I mean, I think people were pretty interested, and obviously the LA Times has a big reach, and Paige did some terrific reels for Instagram that got a lot of traction.
The artwork was great. I loved it.
And it's definitely gotten a lot of attention. There's been some pushback. Not everybody who saw their products featured in it was too happy about it. What we have gotten a bit of pushback on social media from West Coast Cure, although they haven't addressed a $3.2 million fine that was levied against them by as far as I'm aware, they haven't publicly addressed, and not to us anyway, a $3.2 million fine that was levied against them by the DCC for what it determined was that the company failed to guard against, and I'm reading from the article here, it said it failed to guard against product tampering, including storing goods in the parking lot in shipping containers that had no security cameras. It was also cited for failing to provide legally required video proving the selection of product samples for lab testing was not rigged. And they have declined to comment on that, as far as I'm aware.
Yes, I believe Jay Cures did a series of videos after the article dropped, and I don't believe he addressed that in any of the videos as well. So when the story dropped, you shared it on Instagram and LinkedIn. There's an IG post that I wanted to touch on. So Vanessa Marigold of Marigold Sweets said, if we're going to hold cannabis to the same standards as tobacco, then we need to regulate it in the same way. The tobacco industry has an entire branch of the FDA. Weed is still a scheduled drug. This fear-mongering article will push people to the illegal market. I posted before, but deleted it because I got attacked by, quote, legacy weed bros. But I'll say it again. And then she says this: legal weed is still safer than the unregulated market. They ran 120 tests, 25 came back with pesticides, question mark. Am I reading that right, question mark? That's a pretty small sample size of a massive industry. Who is the private lab? And did they buy from one dispensary or multiple shops? A lot of missing info on this scathing attempt to take the California burgeoning legal market down. So what is your response to those who feel this way, that this story is a bunch of fear mongering?
Well, there's a lot going on in that post. So I'll try and address most of it, if not all of it. But I mean, first of all, I think she's right. That it is not, weed isn't regulated on a par with tobacco, and to make it as, tobacco isn't safe. Tobacco is, the most dangerous thing you can do to your body, really. So, and she's right that we don't, it's not, weed isn't monitored as closely. She's also right that, and federal regulation would probably help with that, or has the potential to help with that. Anyway, in terms of, look, we don't have the budget or the time or anything to sample the whole market. We chose the products we chose for a variety of reasons. Some of them had been the subject of recalls. Some of them were randomly selected, and we can't. And the one thing we'll say is we focused on vapes. And you're right. I mean, we can't say how dangerous the products in the market are based on our small sample size. What we can come closer to saying is it's very hard. It's really, based on the results we found, it's very hard to say with confidence that that any product is safe. Although I understand there are some certification programs that aim to and mainly I think private certification programs. There's also a California organic program or sort of organic style program that aims to address that. I think that's mainly flour, though.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure. So yeah, I mean, both of those points are true. Also, is she right that the product on the illegal market is probably dirtier? Yes. I don't know. I'd certainly be interested in doing those tests.
Yeah, I would bet on that as well.
But I mean, one of the things we've come across is that based the system right now for testing product, where brands pick their own labs, and if they don't like the results they get, they can go to another lab. That doesn't really inspire confidence. And another thing that doesn't really inspire confidence is that if they determine that even if their preferred lab is not going to pass their product, there are ways to divert it to the illegal market, and that is, I think we can be pretty confident that is happening. So we know that product. I think we can say with a good deal of confidence that a lot of the product that shows up in trap shops in California and potentially in other states and even abroad is discarded from the licensed market because it couldn't pass a test.
Wow. So the trap is flooded with just failed samples that couldn't make it.
We haven't tested that, but
one could presume, yeah.
It's certainly a question I would be interested in testing. So I mean, the comments about our findings aren't necessarily what most of the points, I think, aren't inaccurate necessarily. Weed is sort of in this no man's land in testing and with everything else.
Wow, and which is, it's a shame considering, it's our lungs. This is our bodies here. So June 15th, just the day after, you dropped your first follow-up. You announced that Governor Newsom had complete confidence in the DCC head. You put it on LinkedIn, and you were just kind of like, what do you guys think? I think you kind of were thinking, okay, some people are going to say something. So Jonathan Tvetko, he's the executive director at United Cannabis Business Association, said, unacceptable. The DCC leadership, as well as bad actors, need to be held accountable. Their failure has resulted in a lack of consumer confidence in the legal market, ultimately creating a threat to public health and damaging the hundreds of millions, billions even, invested by operators. What do you feel is the short-term and long-term impact of the investigation on consumer confidence in the legal market?
Well, one of the main arguments for legalizing weed is that we can be assured that products are safer. But it seems pretty clear that, and I don't think this problem is limited to California, or at least there's very little reason to believe that this problem is limited to California. But we probably need to do a better job of ensuring that the legal market provides clean product, or else people will go keep their guy because he doesn't tax them 30%. Yeah. And the legal market essentially the legal market's survival depends on the confidence of their customers that they are getting some value for their taxes and for participating in it. And at least with the findings of our story, that's pretty hard to do.
Yeah, they have a big task ahead of them. I think that ultimately the consequences is basically the industry failing if they don't get their shit together, or else we're not going to have that confidence to keep buying. If I have the guy down the street that can meet me and get me what I need, why am I going to be going and spending the money there when it's not can't even confirm that it's clean for me? So yeah, absolutely. I think on this post on LinkedIn, we had another comment by Elliot Lewis of Catalyst. He said, I will get another DCC inspection if I tell you what I really think. They are a PR firm, not a regulatory body. They do nothing right. Name one thing. So from working with them over the years, are they getting anything right?
I think so. Elliot Lewis is the very outspoken CEO of Catalyst Cannabis, which is one of the main or one of the largest retailers in California. I think they have a very, very hard job, and I, like I said earlier, I was in Colorado before I was in California.
Mm-hmm.
They've been tasked with doing something. All of these regulatory agencies, cannabis state regulatory agencies, of doing something incredibly complicated, and that they don't have the budget for it, they don't have the preparation for it, they don't have the resources for. They're under a lot of pressure from industry, who wants to be able to produce and distribute their product as inexpensively as possible. And it's a very hard, very, very hard thing to do. And it's harder in California than anywhere else because the market is so big, the entrenched illegal market. So I think what I would say about legalization is that the regulatory agencies are doing a good job of creating sort of a consumer friendly experience where consumers, they can go to this dispensary, they can buy their product, they should be able to assume it's clean, although that's a matter of dispute. But that this can be normalized for them, and I think it sort of speaks to the way weed works on people, and that this has gone relatively smoothly. In that, roads haven't become more dangerous. I think that was sort of a Chicken Little fear. But that this has, the cannabis normalization has, and sort of commerce, at least at the retail level, has gone pretty well, is perhaps a credit to the regulatory agencies, as well as perhaps just the nature of the plant, that maybe it wasn't going to cause big problems under any circumstances. But I think there's, beneath that veneer, there's very little that is going smoothly. Certainly in California. And the more I read about, the more I study it, the more I report on it, the more I believe that. So it's a very hard job. And I think part of it was sort of, I think and I'm not speaking for any particular agency, any particular state agency, but just sort of that this would sort of slip away as people adopted legal product. But illegal product has had more staying power than people thought it would. So it's caused big problems in a lot of places. And I think when you try, I'm not a libertarian generally, but I think I've gained a certain respect for the plant and how it sort of mocks those that try to tame it. And maybe the best way to sort of keep it under control is to not try and overregulate it. And in that respect, I think I kind of in some agree with industry, even if maybe we reach the same conclusion different ways.
Yeah. I love that. Beautifully said. I think the that nature and the plant tends to teach us more when we leave it alone. So June 26th, you reported the class action lawsuit. On June 24th, Infinite and Anresco filed a lawsuit against 13 independent labs that test cannabis product for the weed industry, accusing them of, as you said, manipulating test results in order to win business while putting consumer health at risk. So a few days later, Bell Costa, one of the labs that was listed in the report there, CEO Myron Ronay responded, saying the allegations contain no merit and are nothing more than a desperate attempt by two struggling and competing labs to gain market share and improve their financial condition. We will vigorously defend the services we provide and are confident that we will defeat this frivolous lawsuit. So, people can sue for anything. There are frivolous lawsuits everywhere in every industry. From your reporting, are these allegations made by Infinite and Anresco, are they meritless?
I mean, I can't speak to the allegations that they're making about specific labs, and I think some of them involve sort of potency inflation, and then some of them also involve sort of overlooking pesticides.
Mm-hmm.
But so I don't want to, I don't want to speak to the individual allegations they're making, but based on our reporting, not too much of the lab system, and especially the dynamic where brands can select their own labs, and labs can offer them discounts and stuff like that. It just doesn't inspire much confidence.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that, with the same report, you also listed the fact that, West Coast Cure, was also included in this. Their parent company, Shield Management Group, was fined that $3.2 million, like you mentioned, still going unaddressed, basically. And so there are many people who have pointed out, including J Cures, that, it's interesting that that it's the labs that were used in the reporting, the ones that put in the lawsuit. Are they wrong to kind of make those connections and have those suspicions? Because that has been a big topic of conversation, the fact that the labs are used in both areas.
Okay, so Anresco did some of the testing for us, and then Infinite, Josh Swider features in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And we were reporting this story over many months, and I mean they were certainly aware that the story was coming out, but I'm not sure what additional connections there are.
Okay. Yeah, I think people I think initially saw the names a few times and they thought, that's fishy. So I think that it's interesting, just as it continues to happen, the roles of these labs. So pesticides.
So I guess I would just add to that, and I'm not speaking to any specific allegations or what anyone is saying, but in journalism, there's sort of an expression of sort of hand waving, which is where you sort of, and it's sort of meant to invoke that you wave your hands and suddenly there are all these different things, and what about that? And really there's not anything to it unless you can sort of demonstrate that there's more than that.
Exactly.
So if somebody wants to make a coherent argument about, I'm not sure what the argument is.
Yeah, well, we have I think a little bit more of the argument to come, mostly with Jay Cure's videos. I think he alleges that, does a bit of hand waving, literally and figuratively. So MJBizDaily.com reported on July 1st that about consumer confidence, basically. So in this article, the Department of Cannabis Control oversees licensed labs. We rely on the labs to verify that the material we purchase, purchase meets state standards. That was from West Coast Cure's spokesperson. They told that to the MJ Biz Daily. And then in the same article, the CEO and co-founder of Gelato kind of expressed a similar sentiment, that if the final product on the shelf is found to have pesticides on or other harmful items, it is not the brand or the manufacturer that's at fault. We have done our due diligence. So from this article, I'm seeing that, it's a deflection from the brands. It's up to the labs. It's their fault. We send you our products. You're supposed to tell us whether it's clean or dirty. It's your fault that this is happening. So in general, it was interesting to see him say that. In particular, the DCC has made a practice of recalling products and publicly calling out the brand and not holding the lab responsible. So, in general, it sounds like the lab has a lot of power here. They can basically say a product is clean and we can't really do anything about it. We kind of have to take their word for it. Do you think that the CEO of Gelato kind of has some merit there in terms of the fact that the labs aren't really and put in question the way that the brands are?
So I'm not speaking to any particular allegation, but just in general, I mean I think I guess what I would say is that's what all the brands say. We are paying them, and so they are so their results, and we trust their results, and that's true, except that the brands are actually in the position to choose the labs that are doing the testing for them, and if they find the lab that is. But by the way, the testing protocols for these pesticides are still very much a work in progress, as certainly as it pertains to cannabis. So there is potentially a large potential for error, but for a brand to say it's the lab's fault for testing these products clean, well, that sort of ignores that if the lab tests their products dirty, they'll go to a different lab.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, the labs blamed the manufacturers.
Yeah, I saw a meme that was perfect. It was the Spider-Man meme where all of them are pointing at each other. I think that perfectly illustrates kind of the fallout of everybody pointing at each other. So I'll say
one other thing. One thing that none of the brands came back to us and said, and maybe there's an equivalent that the labs could have come up with that's sort of escaping me, but I'll say that none of the manufacturers came back to us and said, we have dove into our supply chain and we are interrogating our sources and stuff like that. They all blamed the labs.
Yeah.
So they weren't. I can't think of any of the brands that sort of got this kind of news, and they all had a chance to respond before the story was published and said, okay, we are investigating this and we are changing our supplier. And none of them said anything like that.
That's interesting. So lastly, in this article, Elliot Lewis of Catalyst Dispensaries, again, he in this article said, there's no way of knowing that the product you have didn't get switched out or that the lab didn't cheat unless you test it yourself. We're moving as fast as we can on these issues. Lewis said that if he finds that brands, manufacturers, or distributors provided catalysts with dirty products, he is ready to call them out on social media and might initiate retail bans. And so he started doing his own testing right after the article. He's like, I'm going to test it myself. He immediately was casting doubt on the particular labs there. And so just yesterday, he posted, quote, if anybody wants to play, let's test Catalyst shelf, comment below the brand you want to play with. You pay for the sample and test and win $5,000 of Catalyst CEO's money. We are doing another round of blind testing, but would love some viewers or even better critics to participate in the next round. Great ROI for you out there that think you got one in your sights. Let's play Who Wants to Find a Dirty Vape for 5K. More to come. We continue to work and grind on this issue. Let's make vapes great again. And then he hashtag MAVGA, which I'm not sure what that is. I think make America vape great again. Something like that.
Make vaping great again.
Yeah, I think it's something like that. But yes, a few other hashtags: challenge accepted, hashtag transparency. Interesting. So this lack of trust in the test results has prompted people to do their own testing, like Elliot. Thoughts on this move by Elliot of Catalyst?
Well, I don't necessarily think without reflecting on his move necessarily, I think more generally, he and perhaps others have said that it's because the DCC seems to be neglecting its role. It's up to industry to prove that its products are safe. And I think that is a mature and forward-thinking and smart point of view. Whether they become good at doing that depends on a lot of factors. And as Elliot has said, it's a work in progress. So yeah. I'm not going to comment on the particular results other than to say for industry, I think it's a good idea for industry to take up this mantle, and I hope they do it in a responsible and transparent way. And I would also say that it's I think, as far as I'm aware, none of the tests he's done have come back negative yet. So that's fine. It's possible that this story took a while to come out, and it's now been out for a month, and maybe product is getting cleaner. So, and that would be a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be interesting for him to see, And so July 12th, you just dropped a story not too long ago. DCC cop charged with gun trafficking. A detective with the California Department of Cannabis Control was arrested in April and faces federal gun traffic charges. The charges stem from an alleged sales in 2021 and 2022 when Harris was with the Visalia force, and alleged messages with the buyer in 2023 after Harris had joined the DCC. So basically, he was selling guns when he was not supposed to. You posted this on LinkedIn, and German Correa's director of sales and business development at Sage 26 Farms put a laughing emoji and said, "I know this is serious, but it's funny to me." While it's not funny, we can all agree that at this point, we're not surprised with just seeing more issues out of the DCC. What does this arrest, how does it affect DCC's public reputation in light of just the investigation?
Yeah. So this story involved a guy who had allegedly been selling guns for a long time, some of them illegally. It doesn't have any connection to, and he was allegedly doing that before he joined the DCC. It doesn't have any connection that I'm aware of to our pesticide reporting, but it's certainly a question for the DCC, and the DCC already faces plenty of questions.
Yeah, exactly. The way I see it, I don't see a connection per se, but it's more like, what's going on over there? Like, what's the oversight? So that's the way I kind of take it. So now I want to move on to public theories. So since the story dropped, people are like, this is big pharma. this is all a big ruse from big pharma, and people are like, no, I don't know about this one. Ultimately, theories and alternative theories, they come out of a lack of trust, and people just want an alternative truth sometimes. So the number one alternative theory here is that the products tested were counterfeit. Juan Quesada, the CEO of Backpack Boys, posted on June 15th, day after it dropped, saying, Backpack Boys 5 Points LA, hands down one of the most bootlegged brands in the game, as well as bootleg products. DCC immediately came in and grabbed a whole bunch of vapes out of our shelves and did numerous tests. Kind of funny how we never heard anything about that after, smiley face. Straight up, once again, if you possibly think that the source isn't valid, or better yet, even the doubt is on your mind, don't spend your money on it. Shout out to everyone who didn't believe this bullshit and knows that we could never. And then several emojis, Backpack Boys. Someone on LinkedIn referred to this post as Backpack Boys' response to your article. Do you consider that their response? Did they ever reach out to you with an official response, or is this kind of their official response?
Well, for the story, they did reach out to us, and they said that they believed that the DCC was investigating some of their products. So that may be accurate, but the DCC hasn't said anything. So we don't know about that.
Interesting.
In terms of it being Backpack Boys being counterfeited, that seems to be true. We came across various forms of packaging for Backpack Boys products, and some of it may be counterfeited. The thing with the Backpack Boys vapes is that, with several of them anyway, I personally bought those vapes at the licensed Backpack Boys branded dispensary in Long Beach, where I live, and I got the COAs for them. So if they were counterfeit products, they were being bought in a licensed store, and they had COAs that indicated they had passed the test. So at that point, a counterfeit doesn't mean anything, because those are the two ways that you're supposed to protect consumers: by shopping in a licensed store, which I did, and having a passed COA, and it did. Right. So
yeah, the fact is that it was at the store, and it tested the way that it did. So you had a back and forth with a community member in this LinkedIn post. And in this post, this community member basically called you out, saying that you weren't tapped in with the culture, and basically accusing your reporting as not aligning with what's really going on. He mentioned that you didn't reach out to Backpack Boys and that there was not enough dialogue. You responded to this comment on this LinkedIn post, defending your reporting. Can you tell us a little bit more about this interaction?
So, yeah, I think I know the interaction you're talking to, and we did interact with Backpack Boys. We reached out to them, and they responded with an unsigned comment. They didn't address the issues in terms of addressing the culture or stuff like that. I don't claim to represent the culture. I know there are things going on within the culture that I'm not part of. I have become involved in the cannabis world, obviously, in recent years, but I don't claim to be a voice for anything. And the point was just to find whether the products that you can buy on California shelves are safe as promised. So that, and our findings were that they weren't. I don't see what we owe the culture beyond that, especially since it's not even clear to me who represents the culture. I think that's a complicated question, and not really relevant to our report.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think you are part of the culture. I think we are collectively the culture, and that we make it that. So number two, the second theory. Top brands were targeted. This hit was orchestrated by competitors. So Jarrett Wasserman, co-founder of West Coast Cure, on June 16th, posted to Instagram saying, plain and simple, the LA Times did not follow the same DCC testing protocols that are demanded of brands like ours in the industry. I can only guess at the motives of the people and the people involved. Bottom line, we have clean tests for every WCC product on shelves at retailers from a lab approved by the DCC. We asked the LA Times some critical questions about their motives and process that they were unable or unwilling to answer. And then the one of these like emojis right here. We will bring these questions and many more very soon. Thanks for your continued support in WCC, and shout out to all the bud tenders, stores, and everyone who rocks with our brand. We love you a million times. Basically, and he signs off. So that was interesting. That was the beginning. And he followed that right up July 2nd, saying enough is enough. Thank you to all the bud tenders, continuing to basically kind of sound off on his response. Well, in this post, basically, he starts putting two and two together. He basically doesn't, he feels that he is alleging that the media and the labs and the attorneys are all working together and making this huge conspiracy against top brands. So he makes a series of posts July 2nd, July 4th. He posts, America sure doesn't feel like it these days. More fuckery from the hit squad. Get a few more coincidences for y'all today. The shit writes itself. But we still got to celebrate our freedom and the founding fathers who pushed back against the system. Happy 4th of July. Time to spark it up. Is there any validity to Jarrett's claims that the investigation is a hit piece to support the class action lawsuit? Because he went as far as to, in his videos, put a whiteboard up. You see that?
I saw the
And then he
whiteboard.
was putting the things. So he's fully going down a path that this is all a ruse, all a conspiracy theory to target it at the bigger brands in California.
I don't want to necessarily speak to his comments directly. But I will say that we live in a time of great distrust and information warfare, and you know, if you can talk about an entity like the media, and that and some people will sort of see things that aren't necessarily there, or see connections that aren't necessarily there. So I mean, see the motives of the motives of a journalistic organization like the LA Times and like WeedWeek are to attract subscribers by presenting the truth as closely and as accurately as we can. And that is how we attract subscribers. And after that, and attract advertisers to those subscribers. How that connects to favoring one, I don't understand how that connects to favoring one brand over another, or anything like that. Mm-hmm. Especially, you know, when, I mean, as far as I'm aware, the LA Times doesn't have any cannabis advertising. My cannabis advertising is primarily from ancillary companies, service providers, and things like that. I personally, you know, I cover the weed industry. I don't really care who does well and who doesn't do well. I don't have any preference. I don't see one brand as representing the culture and one brand not representing the culture. It's just not the way I see things as a journalist. And I think there's a lot of people out there who don't really understand journalism and how it works and what motivates it. And maybe that's journalists' fault. In fact, I'm sure some of it is journalists' fault, but I don't necessarily follow the logic of what some of our critics are putting out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely see that. So theory number 3, and then we'll get to the last one. Pesticide use in cannabis oil is a product of cultivation consultants who identified pesticides that were not tested for and advised companies to use them. So Trent Hancock, who is a cannabis business owner and grower from Creswell, Oregon, he's been speaking out about pesticides in cannabis products for a few years now, and he's actually been praised for it quite a bit. So I've been following his posts since the article dropped, and he's been really gathering a lot of interesting dialogue from other states. He posted saying pesticides in legal cannabis is the biggest story in cannabis history and causing an earthquake. But let's be real, the industry insiders knew about this problem for years. This started with all these snake oil cultivation consultants setting up grows for the big players. They all learned their craft from Google searches and told investors that they were master growers. Many of them are on LinkedIn still selling their services. We wrote an article for Grow Magazine in 2018 predicting their snake oil consulting would lead to heavy pesticide use. We have wrote several articles about how they would find what pesticides were not tested for and advise companies to use these sprays. If I was in the cannabis business, I would sue their consultants, because if you are spraying in the flower, you don't have the right environment control or genetics. So would love your thoughts on kind of his thoughts here. I think that you touched on the oil containers. And so I feel like you kind of would agree with his perspective.
Well, I guess what I would say is I've definitely heard stories about sort of folks going around and saying, "Hey, I can take care of this issue for you with various pesticides." And I mean, this is on the DCC because the list that they created for pesticides hasn't changed since the California market opened in 2018. So,
and why is that? Whose fault is that?
Well, I don't know who's. I think they have said they have plans to, but just the fact of the kinds of people who are in the cannabis business, they're creative, they're looking, they're problem solvers, and if something's not on the list, they're gonna use it, and so it's on the DCC to be aware of this and update their list accordingly, and they haven't done that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that until they expand the list, it's only going to make these snake oil consultants just a little more savvier in that way. So lastly,
and by the way, they may not be snake oil. They may be selling things that actually work in terms of killing what they need to kill, because that's a real issue for growers. But, or it may seem that way to, you know, I'm not a farmer. I can't speak to this, but the fact is that some of these things may have severe consequences for people who inhale them.
Yeah, the users. And lastly, number 4, mistakes were made in 2023. All product from 2024 is more clean, if not all clean. That's a theory from Elliot Lewis, CEO of Catalyst Dispensaries. So we reached out to him for comment. We let him know that we were going to be talking about this topic, and we wanted to know what his thoughts were just for everything that's going on. He said this: We triple blind tested with the labs, included the ones that are crusading, Infinite and Anrest grow with a full panel. I'm not going to engage in rumors, but I have solid intel that there was a few guys playing fast and loose in 2023. It took the LA Times like 6 months to break the story, so the game got cleaned up. While they were poking around is the most likely the thing that happened. What I tested is clean. That's for sure. And last round was blind and results basically the same. I'm going to keep testing to make sure that we are 100% and going to broach the THC issue. I don't release, but every brand is lying their ass off on THC. The story is long and some is hearsay, but some wild accusations in there. I don't put rumors out publicly that are that damning. As for 2024, I think the game is way, way, way more clean, if not all clean. In the comments section of our post for the podcast, someone commented with an account with no post saying to expose Catalyst CEO on this podcast. We asked them to elaborate because I don't know what that means. And so Elliot responded to that saying, as far as exposing me for what? For being a stubborn prick that won't die. LOL. And smiley faces. So that was really interesting. I think that considering his take, what do you have to say in terms of all of the product that he's tested being clean?
Like I said, I think industry, it may fall to industry to regulate itself. I don't want to speak to the efforts of one person. I think it's going to require more of a collaborative effort, and obviously the DCC can help with that. If product is cleaner now than it was 6 months ago, that's great, and maybe our story had something to do with that. It's just not. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm certainly happy to hear that. More clean is definitely good for all of us. I think that you're right. At the end of the day, it's not the efforts of one person, but I think it's the industry wanting to play a role in this. That we congratulate people that are kind of taking on that and doing it for themselves. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm sure he'll continue posting and sharing more results. I'll keep an eye on Backpack Boys and West Coast Cure. I feel like Backpack Boys just moved on. They're not even looking over here anymore, but West Coast Cure and Jarrett, I think they are continuing to push back and really work on their narrative. So we'll definitely keep an eye on. So to end, are there any angles to the story that you're currently pursuing? Are you still developing this?
Yeah. I'm working on some follow-ups, and Paige may be working on some follow-ups as well. I think there's a huge amount to explore here. And there are lots of different angles to take. I mean, it's certainly interesting. I think testing illegal product is certainly an interesting question to see how it compares. Testing.
I would love to see that, like going into a trap shop and because what if those products were all clean?
Yeah.
That would be interesting.
So, I mean, that's a really interesting question. I think what's going on in other states and what kind of relationship it bears to what we're seeing here, that's interesting. There's a lot.
There is a lot. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Fascinating to learn more about the behind the scenes of this amazing article that just shook us all. But ultimately, it's shaken us all to really understand what we're smoking. We're too easy to just grab a vape and inhale it and bring it into our whole ecosystem. So thank you for your work and for bringing this to the public.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Yes. Okay. Signing out. Awesome.